Today we're going to work on rendering a planar nose from the front. Here I've already rendered one in Photoshop to see what the final's going to look like pretty close. So let's go ahead and get started. You're welcome to follow along in Photoshop if you'd like to. What I'm going to do is I'm just going to move the canvas down here to the corner and kind of get started with a little layout. We're going to lay out some structural lines first. Those are just going to be relatively straight lines, and we're going to focus on the length of the nose and roughly the angle by working on the trapezoid at the bottom. So here I'm just kind of starting with a flat line. It's going to be just straight across since it's straight on. If you're doing a different angle, it's going to be at a much different angle again. Working on this trapezoid on the bottom, you're going to see that I just add another line. The distance on that line on the bottom is going to dictate how much of an angle the nose is actually looking up. So with this angle, it's just very slightly. So I'm going to work on right here by establishing the keystone between the eyes. That's going to be roughly where the bridge meets the forehead. And then I'm going to go with the width of the nose. These two lines that I'm putting down right now are going to establish roughly how wide the ball of the nose is going to be. So by holding shift in Photoshop, you can actually draw a straight line by touching your Wacom tablet and then touching again on the point that you want to establish. So with these two added, I'm going to start working on how wide the planar section of the nose is going to be. This is going to be from the ball of the nose down to the base of the nose where the wings touch the mouth basically. Okay, from here we need to establish the same corner from the keystone of the nose down to roughly about the corner of the eye. So I'm going to do the same thing. This one's actually going to be just following the same angle as the trapezoid on the bottom of the nose. By holding shift, I'm going to establish another straight line. Depending on how hard you press down on your Wacom tablet is going to establish how dark that line is. So this is a fairly light touch right here, just enough to establish it. Now I've also got transfer turned on in my brush shapes, which is going to also make it go from dark to light depending on pressure. Now what I'm going to do here is just establish some colored dots on the side so you're going to be able to see what dots you basically work on from one corner to the next. The ball of the nose is actually known as the greater alar cartilage. I'm probably saying that wrong, but it's actually in two segments. I'll start getting into that here in color in just a moment. So what I'm going to do here is start to establish the width of the nose, basically where it connects to the bone of the nose, and as well basically the nasal area. So I'm starting to work on the septum here, and that's going to go immediately into the nostril, and the roundness of those is going to be dictated by the ball of the nose and the wings of the nose. I'm going to bring up the wings here. The wings of the nose and the overall shape of the nose is going to vary dramatically from one person to the next. The shape of the ball of the nose is going to be basically just drawn in with these two lines here, and you can actually change that wider, more narrow, however you'd like to, and it's going to be different from one person to the next. Some people have a fairly large ball on their nose, some have a very narrow ball. It's really going to change on the person, so when you're drawing somebody, you really want to take note of how wide that ball is and the width of the nose in general. So right here I'm starting to work on where the bridge of the nose, or the nasal bone, switches over into the lateral cartilage. So the nasal bone is actually coming right from the skull. It's the upside down heart shape that you'll see when you're looking at a skull, and that will immediately go into the lateral cartilage, which isn't actually bone, and that's going to go right down to the greater alar cartilage. And I'm probably saying that wrong, I apologize. I'm just going to put some notes here for reference later on. I'm going to supply this as a downloadable file, so you'll be able to go over to my website or Facebook and actually download this Photoshop file just to get a rough idea on how I lay these out. I'm going to rearrange my layers here and paint in the different colors to represent the different sections of where the bone meets the cartilage at, and where the lateral cartilage meets the greater alar cartilage, and down to the wings of the nose. I'll represent these in just different colors. This is done just by standard color picking in Photoshop. Right here you're going to get a basic idea on what I'm talking about, where you have the two segments of cartilage that come in here. I'm going to just kind of brush it out right here just to give you a rough idea. Some people, this section of the ball of the nose is very noticeable on the split, and you can actually see it. A lot of people, you can't see it at all. If you press on your own nose, there's probably a good chance you'll actually be able to feel a very small seam down the center of it. Make a copy of this so we can actually start painting in the values of another nose. From here I'm going to go ahead and speed up the Photoshop file. All I'm really going to do here is paint in different values of gray, and it's going to be a lot of basic color picking just to stay in different values and so forth. So right here I'm just going to start establishing that core shadow. I started off by just doing a line, and that gives me an idea of where the light's going to hit. I'm going to add just a little separation on the separation of the alar cartilage, and then I'm going to start with a bigger brush and just block in the larger shapes of value. By blocking in the value like I have here, it gives you a good idea on where the light's going to hit. I usually try to keep the block in fairly large and leave a little room for interpretation, but I really want to establish where the light's coming from and the intensity of the light. I'll continue to refine it and whittle it down to a much more complex shape as I progress, but if you start too complex early on, you're not going to be able to follow what you're working on. And you're going to find out that by the time you're done with the piece, it's not going to be cohesive as a full. So you really need to block it in with the large shapes and work down to the smaller shapes. I also follow the shape of the nose when I'm rendering. In this case, you'll follow the planes pretty much with whatever you're working on. In this case, being the nose, I'm going to follow a lot of the planes of the nose, which way it's wrapping, and the size of the brush can also help dictate which way it's going and help lead your eyes. When working on the nostrils, you also don't want to fill them in completely black. There are going to be darker areas than others, but there's usually going to be some sort of light that's bouncing in there. Very rarely you'll have a full black area on your painting, and if you usually put a full black there, you're going to find out that it almost kills the value overall. There are a few things that you might make all black, but for the most part, you want to go fairly dark, but not black. I'm also going to establish a little bit of light hitting the bridge of the nose, as well as the ball of the nose. You're going to see that I actually did add some darker values across the bridge of the nose. A lot of people will sometimes, when they're starting out, just leave that completely white. There are times where you want to do that, but when you're doing a painting, it will usually inherit some color and be a little bit darker than you expect it to be. This will also help you bring out the ball of the nose, which will give you a lot more 3D shape to it by adding an actual roundness to the look. As you can see here, I've actually added a little bit of a highlight on there, which helps push that ball of the nose out even further. Hopefully this video will help you get some clarity in drawing a nose and how it's originally constructed. It can be pretty intimidating when you try to dive in right at first, but once you understand the basic shapes to it and how simple the nose starts out, you can pretty much draw from any angle. I hope you enjoyed this video, and I'll be sure to post up more as they come. Feel free to leave comments or questions in the comment boxes below, and I'll get back to you as soon as I get them.